The alarm clock blared at 5 o'clock sharp, its shrill tone jarring Rose awake and filling her modest apartment. She rose slowly, fatigue and worry etched on her face. The linoleum floor creaked under her bare feet as she shuffled to the kitchen, the sound adding to the atmosphere of weariness. For her daughter, Maria, she prepared a simple breakfast of oatmeal. The little girl, her eyes bright with innocence, sat at their rickety kitchen table. "Mommy, what about you?" Maria asked, her gaze full of concern for Rose. Rose forced a smile. "Don't worry about me, honey. I already had a big breakfast," she replied softly. Maria frowned, unconvinced. "Are you sure, Mommy? I heard your tummy grumbling." Rose caressed her daughter's cheek. "I'm sure, my love. Now eat your oatmeal before it gets cold." The truth was, Rose hadn't eaten since the previous night. Her stomach growled in silent protest, but she refused to show any sign of her sacrifice. Love for her daughter was the engine that drove her day after day. Her clothes were threadbare, patches barely holding back the holes. Maria wasn't much better off. Her shoes were so worn, they offered little protection from the cold floor. Despite everything, Rose remained steadfast in her resolve to give her daughter the best she could. After breakfast, she took Maria's hand, leading her to the school bus stop. The street was deserted, the houses lining it seeming as tired as Rose felt. At the stop, she bent down to Maria's height, her touch gentle as she adjusted her daughter's coat. "Have a good day at school, my love," she said, trying to hide the fear she felt for their uncertain future. "Thank you, Mommy. I love you," Maria replied, hugging her mother tightly before climbing onto the bus. Rose watched the bus pull away, a mix of pride and sadness washing over her. Slowly, she walked back home, her thoughts consumed by the day's worries. She was on her knees in the bathroom, scrubbing the tile floor with determined strokes, when the phone rang sharply. Rose jumped to her feet, drying her hands on her apron. She answered the phone, her voice holding a hopeful note that hadn't been there for weeks. "Mrs. Santiago, I'm calling from Danvers Consulting. We've reviewed your application and would like to invite you for an interview for the receptionist position." Rose's tired eyes widened, a spark of hope flickering within them. "Yes, of course. Thank you so much," she said, grabbing a pen and a scrap of paper. "When would the interview be?" "This Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning," replied the voice on the other end. "Perfect. I'll be there," Rose responded, her hand trembling as she wrote down the details. She hung up the phone, a tentative smile touching her lips. This small spark of optimism was a bright spot in the dreary fabric of her days. She spent the rest of the afternoon finishing her household chores, buoyed by renewed purpose. That evening, after tucking Maria into bed, Rose sat at the small kitchen table. She needed to plan, needed to prepare for the interview. She had to give it her all if she wanted a real chance. The next morning, Rose woke early and carefully took out her only decent outfit, a white blouse and a black skirt. She laid them out on the ironing board, meticulously smoothing each crease and wrinkle. Afterward, she went to her neighbor, Donna's apartment. She hated to ask, but she needed to borrow some makeup. "Of course, Rose. Take what you need," Donna said, pressing a small bag of cosmetics into her hand. "And good luck with the interview. I know you'll do great." "Thank you, Donna. It means a lot to me," Rose replied gratefully. Back in her own apartment, she stood in front of the cracked bathroom mirror, carefully applying the borrowed makeup. She practiced her answers in a low voice, trying to find the right balance between confidence and humility. She had to show them she was the right person for the job, but they also needed to know how badly she needed this. Friday morning dawned, and Rose woke with her heart pounding in her chest. She dressed carefully, taking one last look in the mirror before leaving. "Today is the day," she murmured to herself, taking a deep breath. Stepping out into the morning chill, she made her way to her old car, a vehicle that had seen better days. As she turned the key in the ignition, the engine coughed and sputtered before reluctantly roaring to life. Glancing at the gas gauge, Rose saw the needle was barely above empty. She swallowed hard, whispering a prayer. "Please, let there be enough." She drove cautiously, every bump in the road, every groan of the engine making her muscles clench. Pulling into a gas station, she checked her pockets. She had barely enough for a couple of liters. Her hands trembled as she filled the tank, hoping against hope that it would be enough to get her to the interview. Back on the road, the car sputtered again, protesting every mile. Then, just a few blocks from her destination, it shuddered to a complete stop. Rose's heart sank as she realized she was out of gas. Looking around desperately, she scanned for anyone who might be able to help. Spotting a woman hurrying toward a bus stop, Rose got out of her car and rushed over to her. "Excuse me, could you possibly help me? My car's out of gas, and I have a very important job interview." The woman gave her a disinterested look, muttered an apology, and continued on her way. Swallowing her pride, Rose approached a man smoking a cigarette near a storefront. "Sir, could you please help me? I just need a little bit of gas to get to my interview." The man raised an eyebrow, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Sorry, can't help you," he said before turning away dismissively. Each attempt to ask for help was met with indifferent stares and unhelpful responses. Desperation gnawed at Rose as time ticked by. She returned to her car, hoping against hope that some solution might present itself. But as she reached it, she found a traffic officer attaching a boot to one of her tires. "Please don't do this," Rose pleaded, struggling to remain calm. "My car ran out of gas and I have a job interview to get to." The officer didn't even look up from his task. "You'll need to go to the police station to pay the fine and have the boot removed," he said curtly. "But I can't pay a fine right now. I'm trying to get a job," Rose explained, desperation lacing her voice. The officer simply shrugged and walked away, leaving Rose alone with her frustration and despair. With no other options, Rose decided to run the remaining few blocks to the office building. She arrived, hair disheveled and out of breath, her face beaded with sweat. Stepping into the air-conditioned lobby, she tried to regain her composure. "Good morning. I have an interview with Mr. Danvers at 10 o'clock, she said, her voice still shaky from her run. The receptionist looked her up and down with a disdainful expression. "It's 11:15. Mr. Danvers has already left for a meeting," she replied frostily. "Please, I had some car trouble and—" Rose began, but the receptionist raised a perfectly manicured hand to stop her. "Punctuality is crucial here. You'll have to reschedule your interview." Rose felt tears pricking at her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to appear weak in front of this woman who clearly had no compassion for her plight. "Is there any way I could wait for Mr. Danvers to return?" she asked, her voice barely under control. "I have no idea when he'll be back. And you can't just wait around here," the receptionist said flatly. Rose nodded slowly, a mixture of helplessness and sadness washing over her. She turned and walked out of the building, her head down, her shoulders slumped. As she walked back towards her car, the tears she had been fighting finally spilled over. She felt overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all, but she also knew she couldn't give up. She had to keep going for Maria's sake. Rose walked slowly back towards home, her thoughts heavy with the frustration and exhaustion of the day. The missed interview, the car troubles. It all felt like an insurmountable weight. Rounding a corner, she noticed an elderly man shuffling down the sidewalk, his eyes vacant, his gait unsteady. He seemed lost and confused. Despite her own weariness, Rose felt a surge of compassion. Approaching the man cautiously, she asked, "Excuse me, sir. Are you all right? Do you need any help?" The man looked at her, his eyes clouded with confusion. "I'm not sure. I was looking for my house on Halemore Street, but I can't seem to remember where it is." Rose felt a pang of empathy for him. "Halemore is quite a distance from here. Let me help you. Do you live alone? Is there anyone I can call for you?" The man shook his head slowly. "I just moved here recently and don't know anyone yet. I just want to get home." "Okay, let me walk with you," Rose said, gently taking the man's arm. Together they walked to the nearest bus stop. Rose paid for both their fares, making sure the elderly man was comfortable and secure in his seat. As they waited for the bus, the man began to talk. "I used to live on Halemore my whole life. It's all different now. The people, the places. I don't recognize anything anymore." Rose listened patiently, nodding as he spoke. "It must be hard to adjust to so many changes. But don't worry, we'll get you home soon." The bus arrived, and they both boarded. Rose made sure the elderly man was settled before taking a seat beside him. The ride was quiet, and though Rose's fatigue was growing, her determination to help this man kept her alert. "My name is Rose, by the way," she said, trying to put the elderly man at ease. "I'm Eric," he replied, a small smile touching his lips. "Thank you for helping me, Rose. Not many people would take the time to do that." "It's the least I could do. We all need a helping hand sometimes," Rose said, returning his smile. Her own troubles seemed less daunting as she focused on helping Eric. When the bus finally reached the Halemore Street stop, Rose helped Eric off and guided him down streets he vaguely remembered. As they walked, he described his house, trying to recall any details that might help them find it. Finally, they came upon a small, well-kept cottage. Eric stopped in front of it, his face lighting up with recognition. "This is it," he said with a sigh of relief. "I thought I'd never find it." Rose smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart despite her own worries. "I'm so glad we could help you, Eric." "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Please, take this," he said, pulling a bill from his pocket. Rose held up her hand in refusal. "That's not necessary, Eric. I'm just glad I could help. Please, take care." Eric looked at her with admiration. "You're a very special person, Rose. May life repay your kindness." Rose waved goodbye and started the long walk back to her own home, her step a little lighter despite her fatigue. Eric's gratitude had sparked a flicker of hope in her heart. She knew that even though her day had been difficult, she had made a difference in someone's life. Rose returned home, the weight of the world on her shoulders. As she opened the door, she was greeted by Maria's worried eyes and the sympathetic gaze of her lifelong friend, Lucia. "Mama, you're home!" Maria exclaimed, rushing to hug her tightly. Rose sank to her knees, returning her daughter's embrace with a fierceness born of desperation. "I'm so sorry, honey," she whispered, her voice breaking. Today was a very hard day. Lucia, seeing her friend's state, quickly closed the distance between them and enveloped Rose in a warm, comforting hug. "Rose, what happened? Tell me everything." Taking a deep breath, Rose tried to control the tears threatening to spill. "The car, it ran out of gas a few blocks from the interview. I tried to get help, but no one would listen. When I got back to the car, there was a parking officer putting a boot on it. I ran all the way to the office, but I was late, and they wouldn't let me interview." Lucia nodded, listening intently. "Go on, Rose. Let it all out." The receptionist. She was so cold. I tried to explain what happened, but she didn't care. I feel so useless. I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills, how I'm going to take care of Maria, Rose said, the tears she had been holding back all day finally flowing freely. Lucia held her close. Rose, you're a strong woman. You've faced difficult times before and come through them. You're not alone in this. We'll find a way, together. Rose nodded weakly, letting Lucia's words soothe her troubled heart. Thank you, Lucia. I don't know what I'd do without you. Maria, who had been watching silently, came forward, holding out a drawing she had done at school. Mama, look what I made today. Rose took the drawing, her eyes welling up as she looked at it. It was a picture of the two of them, holding hands beneath a bright, shining sun. It's beautiful, Maria. Thank you. Everything will be okay, Mama, Maria said, hugging Rose again. I love you. Rose wiped her tears and managed a smile, even though her heart was heavy. I love you too, my love. And yes, everything will be okay. We'll figure it out. Lucia stood and headed toward the kitchen. I'm going to make us something to eat. You need to keep your strength up. Thank you, Lucia. You're a lifesaver, Rose said, sinking gratefully onto the sofa, feeling the day's weariness in every bone. Don't mention it. That's what friends are for, Lucia replied from the kitchen. Now, you just relax while I get dinner started. As the aroma of cooking food began to fill the small apartment, Rose felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Dinner was a subdued affair, but the hot soup Lucia had made warmed Rose from the inside out. They sat at the table, sharing stories and laughter, easing the burden of the day. After dinner, Rose tucked Maria into bed. Sleep tight, my love, she said, kissing her daughter's forehead. I love you. Love you too, Mama, Maria mumbled sleepily, closing her eyes with a contented smile. Rose switched off the light and lingered in the doorway, watching her daughter sleep. She knew she had a fight ahead of her, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Later, lying in her own bed, Rose thought about the day. It had been one of the hardest she'd ever faced, but it had also reminded her of the importance of friendship and love. She closed her eyes, determined to face tomorrow with renewed resolve. Rose woke early the next morning, the first light of dawn filtering through her curtains, casting a peaceful glow over everything. She felt a surge of hope for a new beginning. Getting out of bed, she went to wake Maria for school. As she opened the door to her daughter's room, she noticed something was wrong. Maria lay unnaturally still, her small face flushed an alarming red. Rushing to her daughter's side, Rose placed a hand on her forehead. Maria was burning with fever. Maria, wake up, Rose said urgently, gently shaking her daughter's shoulder. But Maria didn't respond. Her eyes remained closed and she seemed to be drifting in and out of consciousness. Panic welled up inside Rose. Oh God, Maria! She cried out, fighting to remain calm. Scooping her daughter into her arms, she wrapped her in a blanket and hurried out the door. Bursting through the doors of the emergency room, she cried out for help. Please, someone help me. My daughter is very sick. Doctors and nurses rushed to her side, gently taking Maria from her arms and laying her on a gurney. Ma'am, please wait here while we examine your daughter, one of the doctors said before disappearing behind the double doors of the treatment area. Rose stood there, her world crumbling around her. She sank into a chair, her hands trembling, her eyes filling with tears. Time seemed to slow to a crawl, each minute an eternity as she waited for news about Maria. Finally, after what felt like an age, a doctor emerged and came towards her. Mrs. Santiago, your daughter has a serious case of pneumonia. We've started treatment, but she'll need to be hospitalized and will require extensive care. Rose felt her legs weaken. Pneumonia? But how did this happen? She was fine yesterday. Respiratory infections can develop very quickly, especially in children, the doctor explained gently. We're doing everything we can to stabilize her, but the treatment will be lengthy and costly. Rose nodded numbly, a wave of despair washing over her. How much will it cost? The doctor handed her an estimate. Rose's eyes widened as she glanced at the numbers. The amount was far more than she could possibly afford. I don't know how I'm going to pay for this, she murmured, her throat tightening. The doctor regarded her with sympathy. We can discuss payment options and financial assistance, but right now, the most important thing is for your daughter to receive the treatment she needs. Rose nodded, tears welling up in her eyes again. I'll do whatever it takes to make her well. Thank you, doctor. When the doctor had gone, Rose sat alone in the sterile hallway of the hospital, the enormity of the situation crashing down on her. She thought about the coming days and weeks, how she was going to juggle the mounting medical bills with her everyday responsibilities. Worry for Maria and the crushing weight of their financial reality threatened to drown her. She slumped back in her chair, her body trembling with fear and desperation. How am I going to get through this? She whispered, staring up at the ceiling, tears blurring her vision. The following days were a relentless test of Rose's strength and resilience. She divided her time between caring for Maria at the hospital and working a string of cleaning and odd jobs. Each morning, she woke before dawn, her body exhausted, but her spirit determined. She would visit Maria, making sure her daughter was as comfortable as possible before heading out to work. Her first job of the day was at a local diner, where she wiped down tables and mopped floors. Then it was on to a nearby office building to clean during the lunch hour. Finally, she finished her day stocking shelves and assisting customers at a grocery store. Every minute of her day was accounted for, every penny she earned carefully budgeted. Yet the money she brought in barely covered the cost of food for her and Maria. The hospital bills continued to mount, the burden of debt heavier each day. One evening, after a long shift, Rose stopped at a small grocery store, her meager wages clutched in her hand. Carefully, she selected the cheapest items, counting and recounting her money at the checkout to make sure she didn't go over. The cashier, an elderly woman with kind eyes, looked at her with concern. "Are you all right, dear?" the cashier asked gently. Rose nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, thank you," she replied, her voice weary. Back at the hospital, she found Maria awake, but weak. The sparkle that usually lit her daughter's eyes was gone, her skin pale. Rose sat by her bedside, gently stroking her hair. "How are you feeling, honey?" she asked. Maria tried to smile. "I'm okay, Mama. Just a little tired." Rose's heart ached for her daughter. The lack of proper nutrition was taking its toll. The doctors had recommended a diet rich in protein and vitamins, but with Rose's limited resources, it felt impossible to provide. "I tried to get some nourishing food for you," Rose said, pulling a small container of fruit and a yogurt from her bag. "I know it's not much, but it's the best I could do." Maria reached for her mother's hand, her touch light, but full of love. "Thank you, Mama. You're the best." Rose smiled, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm trying, sweetheart. I'm trying." Lucia visited regularly, bringing food and offering emotional support. She did what she could to help her friend, but even with her help, their needs felt overwhelming. "Rose, you need to rest," Lucia said one evening, watching over Maria as she slept. "You can't keep going like this. You're wearing yourself out." "I know, but I don't have a choice. Maria needs me to be strong," Rose replied, her voice thick with despair. "We're in this together. We'll find a way," Lucia said, squeezing Rose's hand reassuringly. The nights were the hardest. Rose would sit in the hard plastic chair beside Maria's bed, watching her daughter breathe. Fear, a constant knot in her stomach. Every cough, every whimper sent a fresh wave of anxiety through her. She was caught in an endless cycle of worry and exhaustion. One night, as she watched Maria sleep, the tears she had been holding back finally overflowed. She sobbed silently, trying not to wake her daughter. "How are we going to get through this?" she whispered, feeling utterly lost and alone. Time seemed to stretch on, each day a struggle to maintain hope. But Rose knew she couldn't give up, not as long as her daughter needed her. She continued to work tirelessly, clinging to the hope that one day, somehow, things would get better. The following day began like any other, but Rose felt a heaviness in her heart. After leaving Maria at the hospital, she went home to collect a few things. She had barely sat down when she heard a knock at the door. Rising slowly, a knot of apprehension forming in her stomach, she opened the door. Standing there was the elderly man she had helped a few days prior, a younger man beside him. The elderly man smiled warmly. "Good morning, Rose. It's Eric. Do you remember me?" "Of course, Eric," Rose replied, still surprised to see him. "What brings you here?" The younger man stepped forward, extending his hand. "Hello, I'm John Danvers, Eric's son. We wanted to thank you personally for what you did for my father." Still a little bewildered, Rose invited them in. "Please come in. Can I offer you some coffee?" "That would be lovely," John said as the two men settled into her small living room. Rose went to the kitchen, quickly making coffee before returning with 3 mugs. "My father told me how you helped him find his way home that day," John began, taking a sip of his coffee. "Not many people would have done that, and your kindness hasn't gone unnoticed." "I just did what any decent person would do," Rose said, trying to downplay her actions. "I'm just glad he got home safely." Eric, his expression full of genuine gratitude, spoke up. "Not many would have taken the time to help a confused old man. I'm eternally grateful." Rose felt a lump forming in her throat. "Thank you, Eric. Your words mean a lot to me," John continued, his expression serious but kind. "Rose, I also heard about your current situation with Maria. I was deeply moved by your story and the struggles you're facing. At Danvers Consulting, we value people with your character and dedication. I'd like to offer you a job." Rose's eyes widened in disbelief. "A job? I don't know what to say. You barely even know me." John nodded. "That's true, but I trust my father's judgment, and I trust what I've seen so far. I want to offer you a position with a salary of $80,000 a year, plus full benefits." Tears welled up in Rose's eyes. That would change our lives, but..." John raised a hand, stopping her gently. "Furthermore, I want you to know that I'd also like to help with Maria's medical expenses. We'll take care of all the hospital bills." Rose felt tears spill down her cheeks. I don't know what to say. This is more than I could have ever dreamed. I've been so desperate, so worried about Maria's future." Eric smiled kindly. "Rose, sometimes life has a way of rewarding the kindness we put out into the world. You deserve this." Rose nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "I accept. I won't let you down, thank you, from the bottom of my heart." John smiled and shook her hand. "We're confident you'll do a great job. Welcome to Danvers Consulting. I'll see you Monday morning at 9. After the Danvers men had left, Rose stood at her door for a long moment, trying to process everything that had just happened. It was as if a ray of light had pierced the darkness that had shrouded her life. Maria, who had been resting at the hospital, would receive the care she needed without Rose having to worry about the cost. And the job. It wasn't just a job. It was a lifeline, a chance for a brighter future. That night, when Rose returned to the hospital, she shared the good news with Lucia, who hugged her tightly. "I knew something good was bound to happen. You deserve this, Rose." Rose, her eyes shining with tears of gratitude, replied, "I don't know what I would have done without you, Lucia. Thank you for always being there." "I'll always be here for you," Lucia said, smiling. "This is just the beginning of something wonderful." Rose spent the night by Maria's bedside, watching her daughter sleep peacefully. For the first time in a long time, she felt a surge of hope. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but now she had the strength and support to face them head-on. Rose stared at John, her mind reeling. "You're offering me a management position? I don't know what to say. This is too good to be true." John smiled, understanding her skepticism. "Yes, Rose. A management position with a salary of $80,000 a year, plus excellent benefits. We're looking for someone who's not only competent, but also compassionate and empathetic. And I believe you're that person." A wave of emotion washed over Rose, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't believe it. This opportunity, it would change our lives completely, but why me? You barely know me." John nodded, his expression sincere. "It's true. I don't know you well, but my father told me about your kindness, your selflessness. And after our conversation, I'm convinced that you're exactly the kind of person we need here. Kindness is something we value highly at our company." Rose raised a hand to her mouth, fighting back the tears. "I don't know how to thank you. Things have been so difficult, and this means so much to me. To my daughter." John reached out and shook her hand. "Just do your best, Rose. That's all we ask." Rose's voice trembled as she replied, "I accept the job. I won't let you down. Thank you. Thank you so much." John smiled warmly. "We're confident you'll be a great asset to our team. Welcome to Danvers Consulting. I'll see you Monday morning at 9. Rose walked them to the door, still feeling as if she were in a dream. As the Danvers men said their goodbyes and left, she stood there for a moment, trying to absorb everything that had just transpired. Life, which had been so harsh and unforgiving, had suddenly taken an unexpected, hopeful turn. Maria, who had overheard the conversation from her room, rushed out and hugged her mother. "Mama, you got the job?" Rose swept her daughter up in her arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, sweetheart, I got the job. Things are going to be all right." That night, after putting Maria to bed, Rose sat at her kitchen table, reflecting on the day's events. She called Lucia to share the good news. "Lucia, you won't believe what happened today. I got a job, an amazing job. A management position at Danvers Consulting, good salary, benefits, everything." "Rose, that's wonderful," Lucia exclaimed, her voice full of joy. "I knew something good was bound to happen. You deserve it." "Thank you, Lucia. I'm so grateful for all your support." "I don't know what I would have done without you," Rose said, her heart overflowing with gratitude for her friend. "I'll always be there for you, Rose. Now, get some rest and prepare for your first day at work. This is just the beginning of great things," Lucia said firmly. After hanging up the phone, Rose sat there for a long moment, contemplating her future. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but this opportunity had given her a renewed sense of hope and determination. As she finally lay down to sleep that night, a sense of peace settled over her. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to dream of a brighter future for both her and Maria. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. Rose woke early, a sense of anticipation and nervous excitement bubbling inside her. She knew this day marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She decided to use some of the advance John had given her to buy a new outfit for her first day. She wanted to look and feel her best. Carefully, she chose a stylish blouse and a pair of slacks that made her feel confident and professional. After returning home, Rose hung her new clothes carefully in her closet and sat down to plan her route to the office. She mapped out bus and train schedules, making sure she had a backup plan in case something went wrong. She didn't want to risk being late, not on her first day. That evening, after dinner, Rose and Maria shared a quiet moment in their small living room. Maria snuggled up on the couch next to her mother, a storybook open on her lap. Rose began to read, her voice soft but filled with a newfound strength. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, lived a brave princess who never gave up, no matter what obstacles she faced. Rose read, her words filling the room. Maria gazed up at her mother with admiration. "Mama, do you think I could be brave like the princess someday?" Rose smiled and stroked her daughter's hair. "Sweetheart, you already are brave. Every day you face the world with a smile and a heart full of love. That's what makes a true princess." Maria closed her eyes, feeling safe and loved. "I love you, Mama." "And I love you, my love. Now, time for bed. Tomorrow's a big day," Rose said, kissing Maria's forehead before switching off the light. The next morning, Rose woke before the sun was up. She made a nourishing breakfast for Maria and packed her daughter's lunchbox, a sense of pride and contentment washing over her. As she carefully placed each item in the lunchbox, she realized that for the first time in a long time, she could provide for her daughter without worry. When Maria wandered into the kitchen, she found her mother already dressed and ready for the day. "Wow, Mama, you look amazing," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with admiration. "Thank you, sweetheart." "Ready for school?" Rose asked, handing her daughter the lunchbox. "Yep," Maria replied enthusiastically. Rose walked Maria to the bus stop and waited with her until the bus arrived. She hugged her daughter tightly, whispering, "Have a wonderful day at school, my love. I'll see you this afternoon." "Good luck on your first day, Mama," Maria called out as she climbed onto the bus. Rose watched the bus pull away, then headed towards the bus stop that would take her to her new life. As the bus rumbled through the city streets, Rose couldn't help but feel a mixture of anxiety and excitement. This new job wasn't just a job, it was a symbol of a brighter future for her and Maria. Rose arrived at the office building early, her heart pounding with nervous anticipation. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by the warm smiles of her new co-workers, who had already begun to arrive. "Welcome, Rose," one of them called out, extending a hand. "I'm Marta. It's so nice to finally meet you." "Thank you, Marta. It's nice to meet you too," Rose replied, shaking her hand firmly, a shy smile spreading across her face. John appeared a moment later, a look of genuine pleasure on his face. "Rose, so glad you're here. Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." He led her through the office, introducing her to each team member, all of whom greeted her with warmth and enthusiasm. "And this is your desk," John said finally, gesturing to a neatly organized workspace situated near a window that flooded the area with natural light. "If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask." Rose nodded, feeling her initial nervousness beginning to dissipate. "Thank you, John. I truly appreciate this opportunity." As the day progressed, Rose threw herself into her new responsibilities. Her nervousness slowly melted away, replaced by a growing sense of confidence in her abilities. She approached each task with diligence, her competence and dedication evident to everyone. During her lunch break, Marta approached her, carrying a tray of food. "Would you like to join us, Rose?" she asked. Rose smiled, grateful for the invitation. "Yes, I'd love to." She joined her new colleagues, enjoying their easy camaraderie and feeling more and more like she belonged. The afternoon flew by. Rose realized she had found a place where her work was valued, where she could grow and learn. As the workday drew to a close, John stopped by her desk. "Rose, you did an excellent job today. We're so happy to have you here." "Thank you, John. I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity. I'll do my absolute best." Walking to the bus stop, Rose couldn't help but reflect on her journey. She thought about the sacrifices she had made, the times she had felt like giving up, and the kindness she had shown others, even when she was struggling herself. She remembered Eric and how a simple act of compassion had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined. Arriving home, she was greeted by Maria's beaming face and Lucia's warm smile. "How was your first day, Mama?" Maria asked, rushing to hug her. Rose swept her daughter into her arms, laughing. "It was a good day, honey, a very good day. Things are looking up." Lucia came forward, carrying a tray of food. "I thought we could celebrate your first day. We made your favorite." They sat down to dinner, the small apartment filled with laughter and joy. Rose looked at her daughter, her heart brimming with gratitude. Their future was secure, filled with promise. All the sacrifices had been worth it. "I want to thank you both," Rose said, her voice thick with emotion. "Maria, for being my reason to keep going, and Lucia, for being the most steadfast friend a person could ask for." Maria grinned, hugging her mother. "I love you, Mama. You're the best." Lucia nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'll always be here for you, Rose. This is only the beginning of something wonderful." From the darkest of times to this new beginning, Rose had learned that kindness and perseverance had a way of creating their own rewards. She closed her eyes, filled with gratitude and a newfound determination to face whatever the future held with courage and hope. Remember, as this story teaches us, God always blesses good people. Everything happens for a reason, and though we may not always understand why we face difficulties, we must trust that happiness will come if we keep our faith and never give up. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. That way, you'll be notified of more inspiring and heartwarming stories that are sure to touch your hearts. Thank you for watching, and until next time.